Why do we have pre-EQ, pre-fader, and post-fader? Pre-EQ, firstly, means that whatever you are doing to the equalization in the house is not being sent to them. They don't hear what you do here. It doesn't influence them. Because often your monitors have quite a bit of a different feel and sound on the stage as the house. And because it's a performance, the house's EQ is what is important, so that the audience can hear a nice sound. The musicians can sort of sometimes live with something that's a little off. It's not nice, it's not fun as a musician myself, you want it nice, but again, if you do not have an expensive enough desk that allows you separate EQ here as well, you'll sort of go for the option that they don't hear the EQ, that the EQ is focused on the house. This is an option that we don't often use or find, but now you're aware of it. The two options that we mostly find and use are the following: pre-fader and post-fader. Fader, pre-fader, before the fader, and post-fader, after the fader. Yes, I did say that this could be called post-EQ pre-fader, but typically pre-fader without reference to the EQ means post-EQ. Why do we use a pre-fader or a post-fader option on auxiliaries? Typically for monitoring purposes on a stage or in a recording studio, we would use pre-fader. Here is the simple reason. The signal comes in. Before the fader, we send it to monitor 1. The lead vocalist wants to hear themselves, so we churn up. Piano wants to hear the lead vocalist, we churn it up. And drums want to hear the lead vocalist, we churn it up. Now we start doing the sound in the house, in the live auditorium. And we find we need to drop the lead vocalist, because they're, for whatever reason, maybe they're very loud, we need to drop them on the fader. This has no influence on that signal, as you can see. It has no influence. This signal goes there and through there. So what you do in the house does not influence them. Why would we want to use post-fader? Here's a good example. Again, I'm referring to our church where we have a mother's room that is connected to either a subgroup or an auxiliary. Again, in our situation where we use the Behringer X32, it does not make definition differences between the subgroups or the auxiliaries. It just calls them all buses, and you can use the bus either for a subgroup bus or for an auxiliary bus as you prefer. I think it has 16 buses. I'm not sure off the top of my head. But one of our buses is connected to the mother's room amp and speakers. In that situation, we use post-fader because we want the mix that we are setting up in the house to be closely repeated in the mother's room. Now, those of you who are more experienced will tell me, yeah, but it's never going to be exactly the same because you have ambient sounds. Yes, I understand. We know. But when we want to put the lead vocalist softer and the bassist louder, we want that to happen in the mother's room as well. And for that reason, it is post-fader. When we have a preacher preaching at a certain level, and just before he preaches, someone comes up to make an announcement. And this guy is extremely loud. So we drop the fader just for that little while. We're not going to set the gain again. We just drop the fader. He may be using the same microphone that the preacher is using. We drop the fader. We want that to happen in the mother's room, for example, as well. Therefore, it is connected post-fader. Whatever happens on the fader influences what happens there. In a more professional situation, where you may be working in a recording studio or with a serious professional band, let me give you an example of how you would use post-fader, not for monitoring, but for effects send. Say you have only one outboard reverb unit. You would then typically send your lead vocalist, your backing vocalists, maybe some guitars, maybe some toms and snare, maybe even some keyboards. You would want them to go through the reverb unit. Now, for this example, let me change this monitor 3 to a reverb. So what would happen is, the signal would be tapped off here, after the fader, and sent, not through these, because this is for monitoring, sent through 3 to the reverb unit. So that when you put your lead vocalist softer in the mix, the reverb also drops, if you follow what I'm saying. when you put your guitarist louder in the mix, the reverb follows along. That is how you would use post-fader in a more professional situation. There are many different effects that you could use like that, but typically instead of inserting it, a reverb unit is a parallel effect, as I referred to in the past. Just briefly to explain that, it means that there is clear vocal signal, dry sound, unprocessed sound coming to your ears, and we add some reverb. That reverb is what we call the wet signal, an affected signal. We have a lot of dry, my voice, and a little bit of wet to just add it to there. You set it up in a sort of a ratio to each other so that you can hear enough of the clear voice speaking or singing normally, and you have some of the reverb being added to it to create some warmth or size in the room or whatever you want to do. But the challenge is when you want to fade this person's vocals louder or softer, or you want to lift the lead guitar or put it softer, or there's a keyboard part that you want to underscore by lifting it and then putting it softer. You want the reverb to stay in ratio or in relationship. You want the ratio to stay similar. So you have the reverb connected post-fader. When you lift the fader, more signal goes out, which means more reverb is created. When you drop the signal, less signal goes out, less reverb is returned to you. I hope that makes sense to you guys. And again, if you have questions about this, you're welcome to ask. In the next lesson, we will discuss effects and processing in more detail. I hope to see you guys at the next lesson. Cheers, eh?